Hey guys, tonight we're throwing on 14 layers of wool and buttoning ourselves into the stuffiest chapter of history, the secret life of Victorian families. Not the polite dinner party version with lacy doilies and polite coughs. No, tonight we're peeking behind the parlor curtains, where the real magic and emotional constipation happened. Prepare for passive-aggressive piano recitals, silent breakfasts with a side of existential dread, and more repressed feelings than your average office meeting on a Monday morning. Before you dive under your comforter, take a second to like, subscribe, and maybe leave a comment below, only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Seriously, don't fake it for the Queen and country. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is. Somewhere, a Victorian ghost is judging your bedtime. Now, dim the lights, flip on a fan for that haunted house ambience, and get as comfortable as you can without scandalizing your ancestors. Maybe tuck in your toes in case a judgmental housemaid materializes out of thin air. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered what it was actually like to live in a Victorian house, sharing every room with 12 relatives and 2 pianos? How many layers of underwear did it really take to be considered respectable? Did anyone ever finish a meal without being judged by the wallpaper? What happened if you sneezed in the parlor? Why did fathers always disappear behind newspapers? And why did every mother sound like she was one minor scandal away from total collapse? Could you survive a day without central heating, indoor plumbing, or the emotional support of a therapy app? Would you accidentally disgrace your family just by yawning at the wrong time? And now, congratulations. You've just woken up in a respectable Victorian household. It's 1874. Your pajamas are made of something itchier than your last tax bill. Your hair is already being judged, and you have more morning responsibilities than a CEO on the first day of Q4. Welcome home. You open your eyes to the gentle sound of absolutely nothing, because alarm clocks don't exist yet. Just the emotional alarm of knowing you have 14 tasks before breakfast. The room is cold, your nightgown is stiff, and the air smells faintly of coal dust and regret. For a brief, hopeful moment, you try to convince yourself it's a Sunday, or perhaps you've slipped into an alternate dimension where beds are soft and mornings are optional. But no. Today is a very ordinary Victorian morning, which means the to-do list is already lurking beneath your pillow like a passive-aggressive ghost. You're swaddled in a nest of blankets heavy enough to qualify as weightlifting. Each one is designed less for warmth and more to make sure you never actually escape. This is security, Victorian style, fabric as prison. Eventually, a draft snakes under the covers and tickles your nose, reminding you that the bedroom is only technically warmer than the garden. You summon the courage to stick a toe out and instantly regret every choice that led you to this moment. The floorboards are freezing, the air tastes of old smoke and iron, and your feet contemplate mutiny before you've even sat up. There are no slippers waiting. The concept of comfort is reserved for rich people and cats. Your bed creaks alarmingly as you swing your legs over the side, as if warning the whole house that you're about to disrupt the precious order of things. You shuffle to the washstand, shivering, and brace yourself for the morning's first test of resilience. Victorian washing up. A porcelain pitcher and bowl await. The water inside so cold, it could be considered an act of violence. With a courage usually reserved for Olympic athletes, you splash your face, instantly transforming your skin into a terrain of goosebumps. If you're lucky, there's a scrap of rough towel nearby, a textile exfoliation that removes not just water but possibly part of your soul. Bathing is not a daily ritual here. Full immersion happens once a week, or once a month, if your family's on the thrifty side. Until then, cleanliness is achieved through hope, prayer, and a polite lie to yourself that Victorian fresh is a real fragrance. Now, the real battle begins. Dressing. If you thought getting out of bed was hard, wait until you try putting on the mandatory minimum of 6 layers before breakfast. Start with the chemise, a garment that's part undergarment, part wearable complaint. Next comes the corset, which is equal parts engineering marvel and medieval torture device. You stand there, arms raised in silent surrender, while someone, usually your mother, sister, or the nearest emotionally unavailable relative, hauls on the laces until your lungs file a formal protest. Breathing is now optional. Add a petticoat or 3. Stockings rolled to the knee and secured with what feels suspiciously like medieval zip ties, then a day dress buttoned up to your chin. If you're a man, you still get to wrestle with stiff collars, woolen drawers, and trousers that have never heard of elastic. Everyone finishes with boots so rigid you could use them to break rocks or fight crime. All the while, the house is coming to life around you. A distant cough from your father's study. The sound of coal clinking into the range. A muffled thud that means someone, probably a sibling, has lost another battle with gravity. If you're a child, your nanny materializes like a judgmental spectre, ready to critique your posture and inspect behind your ears with forensic intensity. If you're an adult, your first job is pretending you're glad to be awake. You pause in front of the cracked mirror. Your hair is already misbehaving, your cheeks pink with cold, and your eyes carry that special brand of fatigue reserved for people who are about to spend the day sitting up straight and making polite conversation about the weather. By the time you emerge fully dressed, you're equal parts shivering, overheated, compressed, and already 2 hours behind schedule. Breakfast looms, along with the endless parade of duties, minor crises, and unspoken competition for the warmest seat by the fire. You take one last wistful look at the bed, your enemy, your ally, and your only escape. Congratulations, you've survived the first 15 minutes. Only 16 more waking hours of dignified suffering to go. Before you can even contemplate breakfast, you're greeted by the household's most loyal companion, the chamber pot. You stare at it, wondering how something can be simultaneously so necessary and so deeply shameful. This is not a spa day experience. It's sitting there, lurking beneath your bed, as unglamorous as a tax audit. The Victorians may have adored lace, mahogany, and tasteful restraint, but nothing says humble beginnings quite like the porcelain bowl of destiny waiting for you at dawn. In a house where modesty is law and privacy is myth, the chamber pot is both a solution and a threat, a quiet test of your dignity. Right there, in the open, you steel yourself and retrieve it with a mix of resignation and stealth, because heaven forbid you make any noise and announce your intentions to the entire household. Victorian etiquette dictates that all bodily functions are to be handled with the subtlety of a ninja and the grace of a royal ballet dancer. Yet here you are, hunched over a cold bowl in the pre-dawn gloom, hoping nobody barges in. It's the kind of experience that really keeps you grounded, literally. The design is utilitarian. No clever mechanisms, no soft close lids. Just cold porcelain, a handle, and your hope that it won't slosh. You do your business quickly, with the brisk efficiency of someone escaping a hostage situation. There's a reason Victorians were so obsessed with good ventilation, and why every window seems to open just a little too easily. It's not to let the fresh air in, it's to let the consequences out. Now, the fun part, disposal. If you're lucky and socially ranked high enough, there's a servant who will take this duty off your hands. If not, you are the unsung hero of waste management, tiptoeing through chilly corridors with the world's most embarrassing cargo. The goal is simple. Get to the nearest lavatory, or, failing that, the garden, before anyone else is awake enough to witness your shame. There is no dignified way to carry a full chamber pot. Not with silk gloves, not with prayer. You clutch it, praying you don't trip, as your family's ancestral portraits glare at you in judgment from the hallway walls. Outside, the privy awaits. If you're imagining a cozy outhouse, lower your expectations. Victorian privies are a masterclass in discomfort. Frigid in winter, pungent in summer, and always equipped with a strategically placed spider. If it's raining, congratulations, you now have bonus atmospheric suffering. You empty the chamber pot with all the reverence of someone defusing a bomb. Splash. Done. There's a satisfying sense of accomplishment until you realize this is the most efficient part of your day. Back inside, you're supposed to rinse the pot, ideally without splashing yourself or the kitchen maid, who has seen it all and isn't impressed. Victorians took great pride in cleaning their chamber pots with as much regularity as their Sunday prayers. It's not just hygiene. It's a ritual, a daily act of humility to remind you that, in the grand scheme of life, nobody is above basic plumbing. After the ordeal, you discreetly return the pot beneath your bed, pretending none of this ever happened. The smell lingers just long enough to haunt your conscience, or at least your morning routine. You splash your hands with icy water, mutter a quick apology to your own dignity, and try to regain your composure before breakfast. It's only now, as you step into the hallway, that you realize every person in this house has undergone the same ordeal. The Victorian morning is a communal secret, a test of character, and a lesson in humility that nobody ever discusses at the table. All those silent glances at breakfast? That's not just repressed emotion, it's mutual recognition. You survived another morning, side by side with shame and necessity, and as you finally sit down for tea and toast, you realize something crucial. If you can handle a Victorian chamber pot before sunrise, there is truly nothing the rest of the day can throw at you that you can't survive, except maybe boiled mutton. But that's a battle for later. Time to wash your face at the porcelain basin, splashing your cheeks with water so cold it could traumatize a polar bear. Soap is strictly for special occasions, and any attempt at real hygiene feels like medieval penance with lavender undertones. You stand before the washstand, a prized piece of Victorian furniture, not because it's elegant, but because it contains the only liquid in the house colder than your mother-in-law's smile. The basin, carefully filled the night before by a servant, or, if you're less fortunate, by your own shivering hands, now sits in the half-light, daring you to make the first move. The matching pitcher beside it looks deceptively inviting, but you know the truth. Inside waits a splash of ice water so bracing, it might just reset your childhood traumas. You hesitate. Maybe, you tell yourself. A dry face is the new trend. Maybe the Queen herself has embraced natural oils. But then you catch a glimpse of yourself in the tiny, wavy mirror above the basin. Your hair looks like you've been wrestling with ghosts. Your eyes are puffy from sleeping in an Arctic wind tunnel, and your cheeks bear the imprint of a pillow that clearly holds a grudge. Fine. You'll do it. First, you test the water with one finger. The sensation is immediate. A jolt of cold that makes you question every life choice that led to this moment. There's no central heating in this house. Only the vague promise of a coal fire downstairs and a dream of someday inventing radiators. Bracing yourself, you scoop up a handful of water and slap it onto your face. Congratulations, you're now officially awake and slightly frostbitten. The Victorian approach to hygiene is a study in contradictions. On the one hand, there's an obsession with appearances. Clean collars, spotless hands, hair neatly arranged with military precision. On the other hand, actual bathing is seen as an activity best left to the reckless or the terminally ill. A proper wash means just enough scrubbing to look alive, but not enough to invite pneumonia. The ever-present bogeyman of the era. You eye the soap dish, which contains a single, well-worn bar that has seen more drama than a week's worth of family letters. The scent is faintly floral, faintly medicinal, and wholly intimidating. Soap, in the Victorian mind, is both cure and curse. Use too much, and you'll be accused of overstimulating the pores. Use too little, and you'll be exiled from polite society. You strike a delicate balance, lathering up just enough to claim you tried. The texture is less creamy luxury and more artisanal sandpaper with overtones of regret. You rub it over your cheeks, trying not to get any in your eyes. A lesson you learned the hard way last week, when your refreshing morning turned into a reenactment of a Greek tragedy. A quick rinse, another round of polar bear torture, and you're done. Well, almost. Now comes the towel. This is not the fluffy, absorbent miracle of the Saint century, but a rough strip of woven linen designed to remove not just water but possibly the first few layers of skin. You dry off with the brisk determination of someone hoping to create friction-based warmth. Your face tingles, your dignity aches. If you're particularly unlucky, today is hair washing day, a bi-weekly event requiring the strategic deployment of rainwater, if available, an extra pitcher, and a tolerance for self-inflicted suffering. Victorian shampoo is a home-brewed mystery, often involving eggs, vinegar, or even a splash of gin if the situation is desperate. The result: hair that's technically clean but smells like the world's worst salad dressing. You look up, meeting your own eyes in the mirror. There's a flush on your cheeks, a gleam in your eye, and the subtle hope that maybe today will be the day someone invents indoor plumbing. But no. Victorian innovation will focus on everything except making your mornings easier. With your fresh face and slightly sanitized hands, you step back into the hallway, joining the parade of other family members who are all pretending they woke up naturally radiant. Your skin stings, your hair sticks out, and your soul feels slightly lighter. For a brief, shining moment, you are clean, by Victorian standards, anyway. As you march toward breakfast, you can take comfort in one thing. If you can survive a Victorian wash-up, you can survive anything. Even breakfast porridge. Maybe. You begin the arduous ritual of layering up. First comes the chemise, then the corset, then the petticoats, then more mystery garments. Each layer is designed to defend your modesty, destroy your circulation, and ensure you remain slightly sweaty until October. Dressing in the Victorian era is not a casual affair. It is a full contact sport, a daily logistical exercise requiring equal parts dexterity, upper body strength, and emotional fortitude. The process begins with the chemise, a humble, oversized nightie that exists mostly to absorb your existential dread and possibly last night's sweat. Made of rough linen or scratchy cotton, it's the barrier between you and the rest of the textile gauntlet to come. Once the chemise is in place, it's time to wrangle with the corset. Victorians believed a proper figure required determination, engineering, and just a dash of masochism. The corset isn't so much worn as endured. You take a deep breath, or try to, as someone, mother, maid, or nearest sibling with a grudge, yanks the laces with the enthusiasm of a sailor raising anchor. If you're feeling particularly brave, you might even attempt to lace yourself in, which requires the flexibility of a circus performer and the patience of a saint. As the corset tightens, your torso transforms from comfortable human to optimistically compressed hourglass. There's an art to finding the right balance. Too loose and you'll scandalize the local vicar. Too tight and you risk fainting dramatically at breakfast. For the rest of the day, you'll walk with the ramrod posture of a career military officer and breathe like a distant cousin of the accordion. If you're a man, congratulations. You only have to worry about a collar starched to the consistency of plywood and trousers held up by sheer willpower. Petticoats follow, and then more petticoats. And more petticoats. How many? Enough to block out a small draft, stifle spontaneous movement, and support the GDP of the British lace industry. These layers aren't just for show, they're insulation, modesty armor, and a constant reminder that personal space is a modern invention. The skirts billow, rustle, and swish as you move, announcing your approach to anyone within a 10-foot radius. Every doorway becomes an obstacle course, every stairway a threat. If you're lucky, today isn't a crinoline day. If it is, prepare yourself. The crinoline is a wire and horsehair cage designed to turn your lower half into a mobile Victorian gazebo. You move with the subtle grace of a small parade float, carefully calculating every turn to avoid knocking over vases or unsuspecting house pets. Sitting down requires careful planning and a minor miracle. Standing up again? Even more so. Stockings are next, long, scratchy, and secured by garters. With the tenacity of an overzealous Victorian aunt, you pull on sturdy boots with buttons that defy all modern logic and thumb strength. And if you're venturing outside, don't forget the layers on top. A high-necked blouse, a waistcoat, a jacket, maybe a shawl or a capelet if it's cold, and it's always cold, gloves, and a hat pinned with enough force to anchor a small boat. Of course, none of this can be rushed. Dressing is a communal event, full of bustling, adjusting, and gentle reminders not to faint in the hallway. Children are zipped, buttoned, and belted into submission. Servants dart around fetching misplaced gloves, lost hair ribbons, or the one shoe that always hides at the bottom of the wardrobe. Sighs fill the air as you discover your cuffs are uneven, or your cravat is crooked, or the brooch you need is currently being borrowed by your sister. You catch your breath, what's left of it, look in the mirror, and see a stranger, composed, immaculately swaddled, and ready to face the day's challenges, at least until something unravels. Somehow, after 20 minutes of determined suffering, you emerge from your room fully assembled, upright, and a little light-headed. You've sacrificed circulation, comfort, and a small part of your sanity, but you are now, at least by Victorian standards, decent. And as you head for breakfast, skirts whispering, boots squeaking, you marvel at the knowledge that you'll have to do this all again tomorrow. At least if you faint in public, you'll do it fashionably. The family gathers around the table for breakfast. Conversation is forbidden until at least 3 cups of tea have been consumed. And the only thing louder than the ticking clock is the sound of your brother's toast scraping against his molars. You shuffle into the dining room, already half exhausted from a morning spent wrestling with wool, corsets, and existential dread. The room itself is a masterpiece of Victorian restraint. Starched white, tablecloth, gleaming silverware, and enough heavy mahogany to make you feel as if you're eating inside a grand piano. Every chair is precisely placed, every napkin folded into geometrically improbable shapes. By hand, of course, because the Victorians distrusted anything that looked efficient or cheerful. The air is thick with formality and the faint aroma of overcooked oats. You slide into your assigned seat, which may or may not be strategically distant from anyone likely to start a scandal before 9 a.m. The family hierarchy is never clearer than at the breakfast table. Father presides at one end, hidden behind a fortress of broadsheets and a wall of dignified silence. Mother sits at the other, eyes scanning the table like a benevolent warden. Between them, the children are arranged by age, gender, and perceived level of recent disappointment. Breakfast offerings are restrained. There are no pancakes, waffles, or even a hint of maple syrup. Instead, you're presented with a menu best described as food for the body, not the soul. Think stone-cold toast, thick-cut marmalade, boiled eggs so hard you could use them for self-defense, and porridge that would not pass a vibe check. Tea is the only true luxury, poured with the solemnity of a religious rite, dark, hot, and strong enough to remove wallpaper if applied directly. Nobody dares speak until the tea has been served and properly sipped. You clutch your cup as if it's the last source of comfort left in the known universe. The first few minutes are filled with the synchronized choreography of polite chewing, spoon clinking, and that one cousin who always manages to spill jam somewhere catastrophic. The clock on the mantel ticks out each second like it's being paid by the hour. Eventually, once caffeine levels have stabilized and a collective sigh has passed through the room, conversation is permitted, but only in the mildest, most inoffensive forms. Pleasant weather we're having. The rhododendrons appear to be thriving. Is that a new cravat, Uncle Bernard? If anyone dares stray into dangerous territory, politics, money, or, God forbid, feelings, the entire table contracts in horror, and Father's paper rustles menacingly. You could confess to a jewel heist, and as long as you did it quietly between bites of toast, nobody would mind. As you eat, you're also performing a subtle ballet of etiquette. Pinkies hovering, elbows glued to your sides, mouth closed at all times, even when breathing becomes questionable. Butter is applied with surgical precision. Toast is nibbled, not bitten. Eggs are spooned out with a level of caution usually reserved for bomb disposal. There's a real possibility that you could live your entire life at this table and never make a single noise louder than a gentle cough. Occasionally, someone attempts humor, a weak joke about the weather, or an anecdote involving the neighbor's goose, but the risk is high and the reward minimal. The best case scenario is a polite smile from Mother. The worst is a lifetime of being known as the one who ruined breakfast in 1874. Servants drift in and out with the stealth of professional spies, topping up tea, clearing plates, and occasionally exchanging glances that say, "Yes, this is our circus too." Below stairs, they'll recount every awkward silence and accidental sneeze in exhaustive detail later on. As breakfast winds down, the table relaxes by a millimeter. Father might lower his paper to nod at someone. Mother dispenses her daily list of instructions with the air of a four-star general. The children plot silent rebellions and hope for an unexpected distraction, a carriage horse escaping, or perhaps the spontaneous combustion of the marmalade. By the time you're dismissed, you feel oddly accomplished. You've survived another round of Victorian breakfast, a test of endurance, etiquette, and the human spirit's ability to suppress conversation until at least 9:30 a.m. You slip away, filled with tea, lightly buttered carbohydrates, and the knowledge that tomorrow morning will bring exactly the same dignified ordeal. And honestly, you wouldn't dare change a thing. Your to-do list reads like a novella. From dusting shelves already covered in doilies to polishing shoes you're not allowed to scuff, every task is a masterclass in futility and restraint. The Victorian morning is not for the faint of heart, or for anyone hoping to actually enjoy their life before noon. As soon as breakfast ends, in absolute silence, of course, you're handed a list so long and detailed it could double as the script for a West End drama. It seems everyone in the household has an opinion on the correct way to fold napkins, arrange knickknacks, and generally maintain an air of unachievable perfection. Let's begin with dusting. This is not a simple swipe and go. Every shelf, mantel, and picture frame is home to a family of doilies, porcelain animals, and vases so delicate you wonder how they haven't already self-destructed from stress. Each object must be lifted, dusted underneath, and replaced at precisely the same angle. The dust itself seems to regenerate like Victorian Hydra, remove one particle, and two return in its place. If you disturb the arrangement of a single figurine, prepare for a level of family scrutiny usually reserved for acts of high treason. Next on the list, polishing shoes. These are not just shoes. They are the foot soldiers of Victorian respectability. You polish them until your reflection is clearer in the leather than in any household mirror. The shoes will never be worn anywhere interesting, just paraded through rooms that you're not supposed to enter, across carpets you're not supposed to touch. Heaven forbid you leave a smudge. The family motto might as well be, cleanliness is next to impossible, but try anyway. Table laying comes next, because in the Victorian world, a properly set table is more important than emotional fulfillment. Knives, forks, and spoons must be aligned with military precision. There are special rules for which fork faces up, which glass stands where, and which direction the handles must point. The napkins are folded with origami-level complexity, while the salt cellar gets its own brief interview with a silver cloth. At least one elder relative will inspect your work and sigh, not so much disappointed as resigned. Once you've finished there, you're sent to tidy the drawing room. The drawing room is a temple of boredom and self-restraint, furnished almost entirely with things you're not supposed to touch. Plump pillows need to be fluffed, carpets straightened, and antimacassars, those little lacy headrest covers, realigned, presumably to the exact angle preferred by Queen Victoria herself. Should a guest arrive and see an off-kilter antimacassar, you might as well change your name and start over in the colonies. The morning is punctuated by a series of additional tasks, all designed to keep you humble. You sweep floors that will be tracked with muddy boots by lunchtime. You refill coal scuttles with a substance that gets everywhere except where it's supposed to go. You water plants that seem determined to die out of spite, and arrange flowers with the precision of a neurosurgeon, because nothing says domestic bliss like 2 hours spent fighting with a tulip. All the while, the house hums with the activity of other family members and servants, each moving through their own chore lists with grim determination. Instructions are given in whispers, and every task carries the subtle threat of being repeated if not performed, to a standard that can never be defined, only aspired to. Occasionally, the mistress of the house will glide through, trailing an air of lavender and low-level disappointment, inspecting your work with a single raised eyebrow. Finally, you find yourself kneeling in front of the fireplace, trying to arrange kindling so the fire catches just right. Another essential skill that will never, ever be officially acknowledged. The soot sticks to your cuffs, cinders leap for your eyes. Your reward for a successful fire? Permission to repeat the process in 3 other rooms, because comfort must be evenly distributed, just not in your direction. By the time the clock strikes 11, you're exhausted, dust-smudged, and already behind schedule. And as you survey your perfectly imperfect handiwork, you realize the ultimate Victorian truth. Chores are eternal, doilies are forever, and you'll never ever polish enough shoes to please the family ghosts. But chin up. There's always afternoon tea, if you finish by then. The drawing room is the pride of the house, a velvet and mahogany shrine to things you must never touch. You tiptoe around furniture as if it's armed, while portraits of disapproving ancestors glare at you from every angle. It's the grandest room in the home, the public face of your family's dignity, a place reserved for esteemed guests, the vicar and the rare cousin with a legitimate title. In theory, the drawing room is for conversation and refined amusements. In practice, it's a museum of things too expensive to use and too fragile to clean without signing a liability waiver. You could run a successful crime deterrent program using nothing but the threat of sitting in the wrong chair. The moment you step inside, The air changes. It's slightly colder, possibly because the fire is for display, not for heat, and possibly because the room is so rarely used that warmth is considered a luxury item. The scent is an evocative blend of rosewater, ancient upholstery, and mothballs. Sunlight streams in through heavy drapes that are only opened twice a year for ritual airing and, allegedly, to let the ghosts out. Every piece of furniture in the drawing room is both exquisite and booby-trapped. There's a velvet settee that looks plush, but is as soft as plywood. There are chairs so delicate you're certain a strong word would splinter them. Marble-topped tables crowd the room, displaying seashells from family holidays, mysterious porcelain animals, and vases forever filled with flower arrangements that are more art than nature. Even the footstools radiate an energy that warns, "Not for you." You're meant to admire the contents of the room, with the reverence normally reserved for holy relics. The piano, covered with lace, sits in the corner like a retired opera diva, used only when there's company, and always out of tune. Next to it stands a harp nobody knows how to play, but everyone agrees it really completes the aesthetic. Bookshelves display rows of leather-bound tomes, none of which have ever been opened, except perhaps for a family Bible, which doubles as an official record of births, deaths, and extremely optimistic family trees. Portraits of ancestors, each one looking more disappointed than the last, line the walls. There's Great-Aunt Millicent, who allegedly once met Queen Victoria's gardener, and Uncle Cedric, who invented a special fork nobody uses. They all seem to be judging your posture, your fashion choices, and possibly your career prospects, despite having done little themselves besides growing mutton chops and inheriting hats. The rules of the drawing room are complex and largely unspoken. Children are allowed entry only on special occasions and must remain absolutely silent. Pets are strictly forbidden, as even a single cat hair could result in years of gossip. The family parlor games are kept here, in boxes so elaborate they might as well be puzzle boxes from a Victorian escape room. You're not expected to play, just to notice that the boxes exist. Should a guest arrive, the drawing room comes alive with controlled chaos. Chairs are repositioned for optimal conversation geometry. Tea is served from a silver service so heavy you need a footman and a positive attitude to lift it. Biscuits are arranged on plates that are never, under any circumstances, to be actually eaten from. Conversation flows politely, with each person carefully balancing a cup of tea, a plate, and the urge to yawn. When guests depart, the drawing room returns to stasis. You're sent in to refluff cushions, dust porcelain, and realign table legs by compass. The satisfaction of a perfectly straight carpet fringe is known only to those who've spent their mornings in pursuit of Victorian domestic glory. At the end of the day, you slip quietly out of the room, certain you've left no trace of your existence. The drawing room remains untouched, a serene and slightly intimidating reminder that sometimes the best way to preserve family pride is to simply never sit down. Congratulations, you've survived another encounter with the most exclusive room in the house. Tomorrow, you'll pass by it again, glance through the doorway, and remember, everything inside is precious, breakable, and absolutely, positively not for you. Meet the governess, a woman perpetually hovering in social limbo. She knows all your secrets, corrects your Latin, and has mastered the art of silent disappointment. She's here to mold you into a perfect adult, or at least a tolerable one. Victorian life would be nothing without its invisible hierarchies, and nowhere is this more obvious than in the case of the household governess. She is both everywhere and nowhere at once, existing in a foggy zone between servant and family. The servants suspect she's too posh to clean up after the dog. The family knows she's far too educated to ever actually belong. If the Victorian house is a ship, The governess is its ballast. Steady, silent, essential, and absolutely not invited to dinner with the captain. Each morning, she appears as if conjured by a sense of duty and faint regret. Dressed in practical greys and faded black, she glides into the schoolroom like a slightly haunted librarian. Her expression is one of infinite patience, tempered by a thin layer of suppressed exasperation, the facial equivalent of a sigh. She begins the day by assigning lessons with military efficiency, never missing a chance to slip a moral warning into your dictation exercise. She corrects your grammar before you've had a chance to even make the mistake, and somehow always knows when you're hiding a novel inside your arithmetic book. Her superpower is omnipresence. She appears the moment you mispronounce a French verb or try to sneak a biscuit into your desk. Her look of silent disappointment, honed over years, can wilt even the hardiest child or most robust jam tart. Yet, the governess is also a keeper of secrets. She's seen every tantrum, every hidden note, every attempt at mutiny. She knows who put the frog in the coal scuttle and who smeared marmalade on the wallpaper. She could bring the entire house down with a single, well-timed revelation. But she won't. Her revenge is quieter, measured in extra Latin verbs and extended recitations of moral poetry. Her room is up in the attic, tucked away from the family but close enough that she can hear every squabble and slammed door. It's modest and sparsely decorated, with only a few precious books and a fading photograph of a home that's probably more imaginary than real. The governess eats her meals alone, or occasionally with the younger children, never at the main family table. She is paid enough to keep her respectability, but not enough to actually join in the family's more cheerful activities. In the afternoons, she guides you through a rigorous routine. Mathematics, reading aloud, needlework, perhaps a little piano for those not yet tone deaf. If you struggle, she offers a tight, encouraging smile. If you excel, she cautions you not to become proud. Her compliments are rare and carry the weight of medals. Her criticisms are gentle but unforgettable. Should you ever ask her a personal question, where she's from, why she isn't married, what she dreams about, she'll give a polite but evasive answer, always shifting the focus back to your spelling list. The governess's inner life is a mystery, speculated on by family and servants alike. Did she once love a tragic poet? Is she a secret heiress in disguise? Or did she simply answer a newspaper advert and find herself marooned among other people's children? Despite her liminal status, the governess has real power. Parents trust her with your education, your character, your prospect. She knows just when to intervene to stop a fight, how to phrase a note to the headmistress, and the precise time to deploy a withering glance that can send the boldest child scurrying. By evening, she disappears back to her attic, a quiet shadow passing through a house built on loud silences. You might never thank her, but one day, years from now, as you conjugate French verbs in your sleep or instinctively sit up straight at the piano, you'll realize she's the reason you survived the Victorian family with your wits, your dignity, and at least some of your grammar intact. Your school day begins with a symphony of sighs, slates, and chalk dust, Latin verbs, French conjugations, and moral tales all blur together until you're not sure whether you're studying grammar or the art of suffering quietly. Lessons start promptly after breakfast, because punctuality is the one true Victorian virtue. You're marched into the schoolroom, a chilly chamber lined with battered books, faded maps, and that lingering smell of chalk, ink, and mild despair. Your governess is already there, clutching her lesson plan and radiating the polite menace of someone who has just found a split infinitive in the family Bible. You take your place at a heavy desk, legs swinging just above the floor, if you're still young, or knees jammed awkwardly beneath it, if you've already hit your first embarrassing growth spurt. There's a strict seating order, determined by age, merit, and the mysterious whims of the governess. Your slate is pristine for exactly 4 seconds, at which point you drop it, chip it, and receive the first of many sighs for the day. The morning's curriculum is relentless. First up, Latin, the language of ancient Rome, law, and, in the Victorian imagination, moral superiority. You stumble through conjugations, reciting amo, amas, amat, until it sounds less like the language of poets and more like a summons to purgatory. You copy out declensions by hand, watching the ink smudge as your elbow, betrayed by your own body, drags across the page. The governess corrects your endings without mercy. You wonder if anyone, anywhere, has actually spoken Latin for fun since the fall of the Western Empire. Next comes French. In theory, it's the language of culture and diplomacy. In practice, it's a web of nasal vowels, silent consonants, and genders that make less sense than your Uncle Arthur's sideburns. You parrot phrases about bread, the weather, and how the pen of your aunt is on the table, none of which seem likely to be useful should you ever escape to Paris. Still, the governess insists, because one day you might be presented at court and must know the exact way to ask for more boiled potatoes en français. Between lessons, you are quizzed on moral tales, the backbone of Victorian education. Every story involves a child whose only joy in life is obedience, and whose fate is either tragic, for the disobedient, or unconvincingly triumphant, for the meek and grateful. You are to read aloud with perfect elocution and exactly the right number of tears at the sad parts. The moral of the story is always clear. Hard work, humility, and saying yes ma'am to authority figures is the only path to virtue, and possibly inheriting a very cold house someday. Arithmetic comes next. Victorian math is not for the faint-hearted. You solve endless sums in your exercise book, all involving complicated problems about how many yards of cloth it takes to make 3 pairs of trousers for 7 ungrateful cousins. If you make a mistake, the governess appears at your side, correcting your addition with a pencil and the sort of look that could curdle milk. Geometry follows, because nothing says good morning like calculating the hypotenuse before your second cup of tea. You are not allowed to ask why. Why does anyone need to pass 10 pages of Latin prose? Why is handwriting judged on the angle of every loop? Why must history be learned entirely through the deeds of people named Henry? You suppress these thoughts, knowing full well that why is a dangerous word in Victorian society, right up there with fun and weekend. Sometimes, if the governess is feeling charitable, you are allowed a brief break. You shuffle to the window, peer out at the garden, and dream of running away to join the circus, or at least to take a nap in the hayloft. But the respite is short-lived. The bell rings, the sighs resume, and you return to your studies, knowing that the day has only just begun. By noon, your mind is spinning, your fingers ink-stained, and your sense of self-worth deeply dependent on your ability to spell miscellaneous. You have survived another morning lesson, battle-hardened, slightly improved, and fully prepared to conjugate to endure in 3 languages. Competition with your siblings is intense and subtle, a battle fought through pointed remarks, extra helpings of jam, and ruthless piano duets. It's every child for themselves in the family's ongoing quest for maternal approval. The Victorian home is less a place of peace and more a training ground for future diplomats, politicians, and occasionally international spies. Underneath the surface of polished manners and perfect posture, a constant, unspoken contest simmers. It begins the moment the first sleepy child shuffles into the breakfast room, and it only intensifies from there. Every activity is an event, every family interaction a test. You and your siblings compete for the prime seat at the table, the largest slice of cake, the shiniest hair ribbon, or the parental nod of approval that's more elusive than a butler on payday. Breakfast itself is a tactical exercise. Who can pour the tea without spilling? Who nabs the thickest slice of bread? Who manages to butter said bread without scattering crumbs and incurring the wrath of mother's delicate nerves? The games truly begin after breakfast, as each child seeks new ways to demonstrate both their superiority and their innocence. There's a piano in the drawing room, an elegant piece of furniture, but also an instrument of psychological warfare. A well-timed, slightly too loud scale can drown out a sibling's attempt to recite poetry in the adjacent parlor, while a stirring rendition of God Save the Queen may win you both admiration and the coveted privilege of being first to the jam tarts at tea. Each wrong note is a small victory for your rivals, each applause a secret score. Reading aloud becomes another venue for subtle sabotage. You aim for flawless elocution, inserting dramatic pauses that outshine your sister's performance, all the while shooting discreet glances to see if mother is impressed, or merely counting the minutes until silence returns. If a sibling stumbles over a tricky word, there's a quick, almost invisible exchange of smiles and raised eyebrows. Congratulations, you've gained a point. Then there are the domestic arts, needlework, painting, the construction of house of cards empires in the nursery. These activities, ostensibly cooperative, are really just a thinly veiled contest to see who can embroider the neatest sampler, draw the most convincing spaniel, or build a card tower that survives the family cat. It's never enough to succeed. One must also ensure that one's siblings succeed slightly less. Outdoor games bring the competition out into the open. Croquet on the lawn is a battle of strategic alliances and secret vendettas, while races across the garden dissolve into arguments about who had a head start or who was impeded by a stray hoop. Even when the adults declare no running indoors, there's always a way to turn walking into a race, if only in your mind. But the true Olympic event is the daily race for maternal approval. Compliments are scarce, delivered with the solemnity of state honors. Your posture is almost acceptable, dear, or that was a passable waltz, can sustain you for days. You observe your siblings for weakness, a poorly tied cravat, a smudge of ink on a pinafore, and plan your move accordingly. Flattery is deployed sparingly, sabotage more often, always with the plausible deniability that would make any Victorian proud. Of course, alliances shift. Sometimes you must join forces with a sibling to outwit a common foe, a governess with an especially long spelling list, or an elder cousin with a tendency to lecture. But these truces are temporary, and as soon as the threat has passed, it's back to every child for themselves. By day's end, the tallies are quietly kept. Victories celebrated with secret smirks, defeats mourned in silence, or, if particularly unjust, with a passionate diary entry by candlelight. The adults may never notice the full extent of your maneuvers, but you and your siblings know you are training for life, learning to balance affection with ambition, kindness with competition. In the Victorian family, sibling rivalry is both an art and a survival strategy. The stakes may seem small, an extra spoonful of jam, a few minutes' peace in the drawing room, but every contest is training for the far more subtle wars of adult life. For now, you bow graciously, hide your smirk, and prepare for tomorrow's events. The games, after all, never end. Lunch is less about eating and more about demonstrating flawless etiquette. You attempt to navigate a minefield of forks, glasses, and topics your mother has preemptively banned from discussion. The word luncheon itself promises a grand affair, conjuring images of tables laden with delicacies and laughter echoing off gilded walls. In the Victorian household, however, luncheon is a much quieter event, more a performance of civility than a celebration of cuisine. By the time the household assembles in the dining room, cravats straight, hair freshly tamed, and hands scrubbed to within an inch of their lives. Everyone has already braced for the real test, social survival. You file in, greeted by the sight of a table meticulously set for a small army, complete with more silverware than one could feasibly use in a single sitting. There are salad forks, fish knives, soup spoons, dessert forks, and the ever-mysterious implements whose sole purpose seems to be tripping up the unwary. Glasses gleam in the sunlight, perfectly aligned. Somewhere, a servant hovers with a decanter, ready to pounce on any water glass that dips below the halfway mark. The meal begins with soup, always soup, often tepid, and requiring exactly the right wrist motion to avoid slurping, a cardinal sin. You're reminded, gently but firmly, to always spoon away from yourself, as though personal safety depends on it. Each course arrives in its own time. A parade of aspics, cold meats, and bread rolls so perfectly round they might double as croquet balls. Your appetite is secondary. The true challenge is remembering which fork to use, and more importantly, when to use it. As the courses unfold, conversation is meant to flow effortlessly, but only along the narrow channels permitted by Victorian respectability. How delightful the weather has been. The roses are particularly fine this year. Cousin Agatha's piano playing was remarkably spirited. All other topics, illness, money, politics, feelings, or anything that might reveal someone's inner life, are strictly off limits. Your mother, ever vigilant, can intercept a pleased, dangerous conversational tangent with a single arched eyebrow or a subtle clearing of her throat. Eating is a slow, delicate process, full of hazards. You must balance your bread roll in your left hand while cutting ham with your right, all without making any untoward noises. Butter is to be dabbed, not smeared. Napkins are to be used, then discreetly returned to your lap, never waved about, or, heaven forbid, tucked into your collar like a bib. At least one child will drop a spoon, followed by a hush so thick you could slice it with the fish knife. Servants move quietly around the room, clearing plates and bringing fresh courses as if by magic. They seem to know instinctively when you're about to need more water or when you're on the verge of an etiquette catastrophe. Their presence is a gentle reminder that you are always being observed. Occasionally, a daring soul may attempt a light joke or a sly remark, but wit is dangerous territory at luncheon. A joke that lands brings a few polite chuckles. A joke that misfires results in silence so heavy you might sink into the floorboards. It's a lesson quickly learned and rarely repeated. By the time the dessert arrives, perhaps a modest slice of seed cake or a bowl of jelly trembling with anticipation, you're more exhausted than hungry. The food is pleasant but unmemorable, served in polite portions that leave you quietly fantasizing about a midnight snack of something scandalously spicy or, heaven forbid, eaten with your hands. Luncheon finally ends with the ceremonial dabbing of mouths and the careful rising from the table. Plates are cleared, chairs pushed back in formation, and everyone files out, relieved to have survived yet another midday performance with their dignity and their napkins intact. And as you leave the dining room, you remind yourself there will be another meal, another round of rules, and, if you're very lucky, a stolen crumb of cake when no one's looking. In the piled high Victorian household, hunger is temporary, but etiquette is forever. The family strolls through town at a carefully calibrated speed, fast enough to discourage loiterers, slow enough to be seen by absolutely everyone. Even the dog seems aware that appearances are everything. A Victorian family walk is not about leisure, fitness, or even fresh air. It is a social performance, a parade of self-restraint and precisely folded handkerchiefs. Before leaving the house, there is a frantic flurry of activity. Hats are pinned, gloves are donned, hair is brushed to glossy perfection, and small children are wrangled into coats so stiff they move like miniature soldiers on review. The process of getting ready for a simple stroll often takes longer than the stroll itself. Once outside, you form up like a battalion. Eldest child to the front, youngest at the center, parents bookending the formation with dignified composure. No running, skipping, or shouting is allowed. The family proceeds down the blank lane in a perfect line, each member acutely conscious of posture, gait, and of course, the eyes of the neighborhood. Even the family dog, usually a mass of chaos and mud, has been brushed within an inch of its life and trots obediently, no doubt aware that rolling in anything unsavory would trigger an international incident. As you progress along the route, your mother nods serenely to every acquaintance, her smile fixed in that delicate range between polite interest and desperate yearning for the walk to end. Your father manages to look both present and deeply bored, tipping his hat to other men while exchanging cryptic grunts that apparently count as conversation. The children are expected to offer flawless bows or curtsies if greeted, but only if the person in question is of equal or higher social rank. Misjudge this, and you risk igniting a feud that lasts for generations. The real challenge is maintaining just the right speed. Walk too fast, and you seem vulgar, possibly even criminal. Walk too slow, and you risk loitering, which might be mistaken for lower-class idleness, or worse, an invitation for unwanted conversation. The goal is steady, purposeful movement, pausing only to admire the vicar's roses or the neighbor's new gate, all while keeping at least one eye on the horizon for threats to dignity, stray dogs, horse-drawn carts, or unsupervised street urchins. Every detail matters. You're discouraged from speaking above a whisper, and all gestures must be small and controlled. Laughter is permitted, but only in small, dignified bursts. Nothing too hearty, and certainly nothing that might draw undue attention. Should a member of the family trip or scuff a shoe, a discreet pause is enacted while everyone else pretends not to notice. At the heart of the walk is the silent competition with other families you pass. You compare bonnets, assess the shine on boots, and discreetly note whose children are the most obedient, whose dog heels most perfectly, and which housemaid failed to dust the front step. These judgments are delivered later, behind closed doors, over tea and a knowing arch of the eyebrow. If the weather turns, you press on, determined not to let drizzle defeat your sense of decorum. Umbrellas appear as if by magic, opened with military precision and angled so as not to block anyone's view of your new shawl. Nothing, not rain, mud, nor a particularly assertive goose, can break the ranks or the illusion of composure. After a circuit of the high street, the family returns home, the walk completed, the neighbors suitably impressed, or at least not scandalized. Inside, hats are hung, gloves removed, and everyone exhales at last. It's over, at least until tomorrow. You may not have covered much distance, but you have traveled miles in the Victorian quest for dignity, visibility, and absolute control. As you settle back inside, the ritual is complete. You have survived another exercise in public composure, and as you glance at your siblings and the dog, both quietly celebrating their escape from formality, you can't help but feel a tiny bit proud. You were seen, you were proper, and you managed not to trip over your own dignity. That, in Victorian terms, is a win. Downstairs, the real action unfolds. Servants plot, gossip, and occasionally drop heavy hints about the master's questionable hat. Above stairs, you pretend not to notice the mysterious disappearance of the silver sugar tongs. If you want to understand the heartbeat of a Victorian household, don't look to the parlour, the dining room, or even the sacred drawing room. Head instead to the kitchen and scullery, below stairs, where the true energy of the house bubbles hotter than the soup pot. Here, in a maze of dimly lit corridors and flagstone floors, the servants reign supreme. They work, yes, but they also observe, speculate, and narrate the ongoing soap opera of life above. Every servant knows their rank and their duties. There's the butler, the general of the operation, keeper of the wine cellar, and the family's deepest secrets. The housekeeper, too, commands respect, orchestrating the daily ballet of dusting, laundry, and emotional damage control. Maids, both upper and lower, zip in and out of rooms with the efficiency of bees and the memory of elephants. The cook runs her kitchen with an iron spoon, wielding both power and pie crusts with equal skill. But for all the structure, there's a constant undercurrent of gossip and intrigue. Breakfast, for the servants, is less about food and more about the exchange of classified information. Mrs. Plum, the cook, wants to know why the master lingered so long in the conservatory last night. Alice, the housemaid, is convinced the new scullery boy is actually the son of a duke in disguise. The laundry maid, who has seen every stain and torn collar, can recite a family's emotional temperature based solely on the number of handkerchiefs sent down each week. The conversation is never dull. Did you see the mistress's new dress? You'd think she was going to the palace, not the garden. Cook says the master's got his eye on the neighbour's pigeons again. Reckon we'll be plucking feathers by tea. Every remark is loaded, every question a veiled accusation, and every answer a piece of the puzzle. Downstairs, everyone knows far more than they're ever allowed to say. Occasionally, a minor scandal erupts. A broken vase, a missing teaspoon, a mysterious stain on the parlour settee. The servants piece together clues with the zeal of amateur detectives, weaving wild theories that would make even the most creative novelist blush. Was it really the cat that toppled the vase? Or was young George, the footman, practicing his juggling again? Did the silver sugar tongs walk off on their own? Or is someone sweetening their tea just a bit too much? The butler keeps a ledger of every missing item and misplaced serving tray, and he knows exactly when to raise an eyebrow or drop a subtle hint at dinner. The housekeeper, meanwhile, runs her own shadow network of intelligence, tracking which maid is late to work, who's sneaking an extra biscuit, and whose shoes are suspiciously muddy after dark. Despite the endless work, the servants carve out moments of joy. They share jokes over washing up, slip each other extra pastries, and stage impromptu musical performances with kitchen implements. Rivalries develop, usually between kitchen and parlour staff over who works harder, or between the scullery maids over who can scrub the pans the cleanest. But alliances form just as quickly, especially when an upstairs crisis threatens to spill into the basement. Above stairs, the family pretends not to notice the mysterious goings-on. The candlesticks that migrate, the boot polish that vanishes, the sudden appearance of perfectly folded napkins when no one was looking. Everyone knows the house runs on the invisible energy of the servants, but to acknowledge it would be to break the spell. At the end of the day, when the bells stop ringing and the house falls quiet, the servants gather for a final cup of tea, trading stories and secrets in the flickering light. The laughter is genuine, the camaraderie hard-won, and the gossip utterly priceless, because in the grand, echoing world of the Victorian household, everyone plays their part. But below stairs, everyone gets the best lines. You sit down to write letters with a quill, a process that takes longer than modern tax season and involves more emotional labor than group therapy. Every letter is an exercise in saying nothing with maximum flourish. Letter writing in the Victorian era is less about communication and more about performance art, a high-stakes game of etiquette, emotional tightrope walking, and, occasionally, espionage. Before you even uncap the ink bottle, you must carefully select the right writing paper. Thick, creamy, and embossed with your family's crest if you wish to be taken seriously. Heaven help the correspondent who sends a message on thin, unwatermarked stock. That's social suicide. You'd have better luck announcing your engagement to the butler. You arrange your quill, blotter, and a stack of envelopes with the care of someone preparing for delicate surgery. The quill itself is a temperamental tool requiring regular sharpening and the lightest touch. Too much pressure and you'll splatter ink everywhere, which is the Victorian equivalent of a typo-ridden email sent reply. All to your boss. Your posture is impeccable. Your writing hand elevated just so. Now, you pause. What are you actually going to say? Most Victorian letters begin with a formal inquiry into the recipient's health and spirits. I trust this letter finds you in excellent condition after your recent ordeal with the drafty conservatory. The real purpose, of course, is to signal your own superior health, stoicism, and command of the English language. A single misstep, a stray comma, an unguarded exclamation could trigger months of speculation and possibly a family feud. It's like social media subtweeting, but with more lace. You wade into the body of your message, crafting sentences so meandering and polite that by the time you finally say what you mean, both you and your recipient have forgotten the original point. There are rules, naturally. Never express too much emotion. Never reveal anything too personal. If you must discuss a family crisis, and there's always a family crisis, wrap it in metaphors and passive voice. Mother has been indisposed, but with a resilience that does credit to her robust constitution, she endures. Translation: she's still angry about the marmalade incident. The Victorians are masters of hinting. If you want to decline an invitation, you must pen a paragraph about the health of your distant aunt, the heavy fog, and your enduring hope for better weather. If you want to flirt, you talk about the beauty of the garden, the chill in the air, or the pleasure of receiving a letter that, strictly speaking, should not exist. Every word is a code, every flourish a shield. The recipient must decipher your meaning like a 19th century cryptographer. Mistakes are high drama. A single misspelling can require a fresh sheet of paper, a full rewrite, and a new envelope, lest your correspondent think you careless or, worse, illiterate. The blotting paper becomes your best friend, saving you from the embarrassment of smudged confessions and inky blunders. Once your letter is finished, you sign your name with a flourish, seal it with hot wax and the family crest, and then watch it disappear into the household's outbound tray, where it will join a parade of similar missives destined for drawing rooms across the country. The delivery is an event in itself. Letters are entrusted to footmen, local boys, or, for the especially paranoid, hand-delivered to the nearest post office. Receiving letters is just as momentous. The arrival of the morning post is met with excitement, suspicion, and a not insignificant amount of anxiety. Who wrote? What news travels by paper across counties, seas, or continents? Sometimes, it's merely an update on someone's cousin's new cow. Other times, it's an invitation, a love note, or the dreaded black-edged card signaling bereavement. For the Victorians, letters are a lifeline to the outside world, a way to maintain relationships, advance ambitions, and occasionally wage polite psychological warfare. The written word is sacred. The ritual is unbreakable. You may never say what you mean, but you will say it with style. And that is what truly matters. So you sit, writing by lamplight, wrist aching and mind weary, knowing that tomorrow the whole process will begin again. And as you sign your name for the 100th time, you realize the Victorian inbox is never empty, and your work as its most diligent scribe is never done. At precisely 4 p.m., the world stops for tea. You nibble at cucumber sandwiches and listen as your aunt discusses weather, embroidery, and the latest scandal involving someone you're only allowed to refer to as Mrs. B. Afternoon tea isn't just a break in the day. It's a carefully choreographed social event. Equal parts therapy session, surveillance operation, and subtle culinary flex. There is a rhythm to it. A comfort in knowing that, no matter how bleak the skies or how exhausting the chores, the sacred hour of tea will arrive and rescue you from further existential crisis. Time itself seems to bend around this ritual. The clatter of cups and gentle hum of gossip become the Victorian version of white noise. Preparations begin long before the hour. The table is laid with linen so white it's rumoured to have blinded at least one housemaid. China cups are placed with military precision, their thin rims so delicate you feel guilty every time you take a sip. The teapot, glorious, heavy and slightly intimidating, sits atop a tray, swaddled in a knitted cozy with the zeal of a child in winter. Plates of biscuits, cakes and tiny sandwiches form a parade of starch and butter, while a bowl of clotted cream stands by like a creamy guardian angel. The family assembles, drawn to the tea table like moths to a very genteel flame. Seating arrangements are not strictly assigned, but everyone knows their place. Mother presides over the teapot, dispensing both beverage and judgment with equal skill. Younger children hover near the sweets, casting longing glances at the jam tarts while being gently reminded by the governess to sit up straight and not inhale their food. Tea is poured with the kind of gravity normally reserved for important treaties. There are rules, naturally. Milk after tea, never before. Pinkies in, not out, unless you want to invite ridicule. And above all, no slurping. Each person prepares their cup to personal taste, stirring, quietly, careful not to let the spoon touch the sides and draw the collective glare of the assembled aunties. A well-made cup is a thing of pride. A poorly made one is a secret shame you carry in silence. Cucumber sandwiches appear, their crusts expertly removed and cut so thin you suspect they were measured with a Victorian ruler. Next come scones, warm from the kitchen, begging for butter and jam. If you're lucky, there might be a sponge cake, iced with Victorian optimism, or a batch of shortbread so crumbly it's basically an edible dust hazard. As everyone settles in, the conversation begins, never too loud, never too fast. Your aunt launches into a detailed report about the weather, again, followed by a spirited recounting of Mrs. B's latest misadventures. Mrs. B, whose full name is never spoken, provides an endless stream of family entertainment, having recently been spotted at the greengrocer's, hat askew, and possibly purchasing lemons out of season. The topic shifts to embroidery, the state of the garden, or the vicar's new sermon, and you contribute with polite interest, careful to avoid any conversational landmines such as politics, religion, or last night's chamber pot incident. Servants drift in and out, refilling pots and replacing depleted biscuit trays, all while pretending not to listen, though you know every word will be recounted below stairs in delicious detail. Laughter bubbles up in small, decorous bursts. You catch your mother's eye across the table, and even she looks a little lighter, grateful for the ritual that holds the day together. Time seems to slow as the table empties. The last crumbs of cake are brushed away, napkins folded, and teacups clinked one final time. The sun is lower now, casting the drawing room in a warm, forgiving light that makes even great Aunt Mildred's complaints sound almost charming. Afternoon tea, for all its rules and rituals, is the daily oasis in the Victorian desert of discipline and duty. As you return to the realities of homework, chores, or just preparing for the next round of social performance, you feel a little steadier, comforted by ritual, sugar, and the knowledge that tomorrow, at 4, you'll be right here again, because some traditions are too soothing and too delicious to ever give up. Entertainment comes in the form of charades, whist, or games that seem designed to reveal your deepest insecurities. The laughter is polite, the cheating is subtle, and everyone's competitive streak is disguised as good breeding. Victorian evenings aren't spent scrolling on a phone or binge-watching a detective drama, no. Your family gathers in the parlor, united by the noble pursuit of togetherness, and the less noble desire to defeat one another at games with more rules than a tax code. The piano is closed, embroidery set aside, the servants are dismissed. The fire is poked into life, and the room fills with that particular blend of nervous excitement and dread that signals fun is about to begin. The choices on offer are both impressive and slightly intimidating. There is whist, which is either a card game or a subtle way for your relatives to reveal their true feelings about you through passive-aggressive trumping. There is charades, where you must act out a phrase so obscure it might have been invented just to embarrass you. The minister's goose escapes during Lent, someone suggests, and you contemplate faking a faint to avoid participating. No one is ever quite clear on the rules. There are booklets explaining the correct forms, but these are quickly abandoned in favor of house rules, which change not only from night to night, but also, mysteriously, to favor whoever is losing the most spectacularly. In our family, we always allow 3 guesses and a bonus round if you can quote Byron, declares an aunt. The game is now officially incomprehensible. Laughter bubbles up, but always within a strict range of acceptability. A giggle is but fine. A snort of genuine amusement earns a sharp glance from mother, who fears the neighbors might hear. Everyone is trying their best to appear relaxed, but the pressure is on. You don't want to seem too competitive, bad form, nor too uninterested, rude. Ideally, you should exude the energy of someone who enjoys losing graciously, even as you plot elaborate whist strategies in your head. Cheating, of course, is rampant but never spoken of. A cousin distracts the group with a question about the weather while quietly swapping a card. Your brother develops a sudden, acute cough at just the right moment, conveniently covering his partner's subtle hand signal. It's all very genteel and deniable. And if anyone is caught, the official punishment is to blush furiously and be offered another biscuit. Children are alternately the life and the scandal of the party. Young ones can get away with mistakes by feigning ignorance, while older siblings attempt ever more elaborate pantomimes in charades, teetering between genius and public humiliation. There are always a few games where adults pretend not to care who wins, though you can spot the steely glint of ambition in Aunt Agnes's eye every time she shuffles a deck. And then there are the parlor amusements designed to be both instructive and vaguely punishing. Word games that stretch on for hours. Memory challenges that inevitably end in someone questioning the honesty of their siblings. And the classic consequences, which is meant to be light-hearted but always reveals that someone in the family harbors a secret desire to run away to Italy with a footman. The laughter that follows is equal parts relief and social self-preservation. Throughout the evening, polite conversation continues to flow, woven through the games like an extra thread of repression. Compliments are offered on a clever mime or a bold bid in whist. Tea is poured, biscuits passed, and the occasional sigh of defeat is drowned in sips of weak lemonade. By the end of the evening, the family has bonded, rivalries have been rekindled, and everyone's sense of dignity has survived, if only barely. The games are tidied away, the last embers of competitive fire banked for another night, and you shuffle off to bed, exhausted by the sheer effort of having fun in a way that would make even the sternest Victorian portrait smile, internally, of course. You fall asleep, replaying your greatest charades, triumphs, and plotting tomorrow's revenge, knowing that, in the Victorian household, parlour games are never really just for fun, they're dress rehearsals for the social dramas that are always waiting in the wings. Romance is a high-stakes chess game played across drawing rooms and church pews. Every glance is loaded, every conversation supervised, and flirting is limited to what can be accomplished with a modest cough and an artfully dropped handkerchief. In the Victorian world, courtship is less a whirlwind of passion and more a long, complicated dance, one where no one is allowed to actually move their feet. There are rules for everything, from how long you may look at a prospective suitor to precisely how many syllables should be in your good morning. The art of flirting, such as it is conducted entirely within the margins of acceptable behavior, under the relentless surveillance of mothers, aunts, chaperones, and the ever-watchful family dog. You start your campaign in the drawing room, positioned on the most uncomfortable chair in the house and forbidden to slouch. A potential suitor sits across the rug, a safe distance away, so safe, in fact, that you could hide a small horse between you and still have room for a tea table. Conversation drifts in polite, aimless circles. The weather, the new vicar, the rumoured arrival of imported oranges. Each word is carefully measured. You want to appear witty, but not too clever. Interested, but never forward. Flattery must be so subtle, the recipient can plausibly deny ever noticing it. A single look can communicate more than a love letter. Glances are exchanged with the gravity of diplomatic cables. Accidentally brush hands while passing the sugar bowl. Scandalous. Allow your glove to slip off, revealing a sliver of wrist, positively thrilling. An artfully dropped handkerchief might as well be a marriage proposal. Yet, heaven help you if you pick it up yourself. A true Victorian suitor retrieves it, presenting it with a look that says, "I am both attentive and aware of my social limitations." Church is another arena for romance, albeit one even more tightly policed. You exchange shy nods from across the pews, pretend to focus on the sermon while sneaking glances during hymns, and carefully ignore the way your mother is already calculating the social rank of everyone within a 10-foot radius. The walk home afterward is the only chance for private conversation, and even then, you're joined by a small army of siblings and a chaperone who walks 3 paces behind, listening for any hint of forbidden joy. Letters are written, always pass through intermediaries, and each word chosen as carefully as though it were destined for public reading. Sentences are packed with code. "The garden is particularly lovely this season" means I noticed you looking at me while I deadheaded the roses. Evenings spent at assemblies or dances are tests of stamina, memory, and the ability to maintain small talk while you're inside performing acrobatics. To be offered the second dance of the evening is to receive a declaration of interest. A third is practically a proposal of joint burial plots. Parental approval is the mountain every hopeful lover must climb. Your mother interrogates potential suitors about their prospects, their family trees, their opinions on embroidery, and their ability to sit through 3 hours of stifling small talk without fainting. Your father remains hidden behind his newspaper, grunting non-committal but blessings, only emerging to deliver cryptic wisdom or a pointed cough. Courtship, above all, is about endurance. You must demonstrate patience, self-restraint, and an unfailing sense of decorum, even as your heart pounds in your ears and your hands tremble at the thought of the next stolen glance. Romantic disappointment is handled with stoicism. If a suitor fails to return a handkerchief, life simply goes on, and you learn to pour your feelings into melancholic watercolors or devastatingly polite diary entries. Still, hope springs eternal. Sometimes, after months or even years of careful maneuvering, coded correspondence, and well-timed coughs, romance is rewarded. A proposal may come, delivered in a moment of great drama, perhaps while sharing an umbrella in the rain or walking side by side on a gravel path where even the hedges are rooting for you. And so, you wait, you hope, and you try not to drop your handkerchief more than once a week, lest anyone suspect your true feelings. Because in the Victorian world, true love may be quiet, but it is never boring. Every cough, glance, and gesture is loaded with meaning. And if you manage to pull off a single wink without anyone fainting in the parlor, congratulations, you have mastered the secret sport of Victorian romance. Father holds court behind his fortress of newsprint, emerging occasionally to deliver cryptic pronouncements or critique your posture. His main hobbies include grumbling about modernity and strategically timed naps. The Victorian father is both a figure of awe and occasional terror, part oracle, part household ghost. His presence is felt in every room, even when he's physically present in only one. If the house were a theatre, he'd be the actor who rarely appears on stage, but whose reputation is so great, the audience holds its breath every time a door creaks. His mornings begin early, with a brisk walk, or, more often, a determined shuffle to the study, where he can be alone with the day's newspaper and his thoughts, most of which are unprintable. He reads every word, scanning the headlines for signs of the empire's decline, the price of tea, and the latest scandal involving someone named Reginald. Woe betide the child who interrupts him before he's had his second cup of tea or before he's finished dissecting the political cartoons. The only safe topics are the weather and, very occasionally, cricket. Father's newsprint fortress is both literal and figurative. He'll fold it just enough to peer over the top, issuing an opinion about the state of your hair or the scandalous new method of tying a cravat. In my day, we tied knots so tight they never came undone, not like these newfangled butterfly abominations. If you dare to argue, he'll return to his paper with a knowing grunt, a sign that the matter is closed until further notice, or at least until mother has left the room. Every so often, he emerges from the study to patrol the house, a moving cloud of pipe smoke and patriarchal authority. His footsteps on the landing are enough to send everyone into a flurry of productivity. Children sit up straighter. Servants glide silently down side corridors. Even the family dog lies down and pretends to be asleep. Father expects order. But he also enjoys finding the one thing out of place. A slightly crooked portrait, a smudge on the window pane, an unswept hearth, so he can remark on it with the air of a man burdened by the weight of civilization. Despite his stern exterior, Father is not entirely without warmth. On rare afternoons, he'll invite you to sit at his feet by the fire, telling stories of his own youth, a time filled with adventures, discipline, and lessons learned at the end of a cane or the bottom of a cold pond. These tales are always recounted with a wistful nostalgia and an implicit warning. Life is harder than you think, and you should be grateful for your perfectly adequate shoes. Father's world is one of rules, tradition, and a near-religious respect for silence. He believes children should be seen and not heard, unless reciting Latin, and that a quiet house is a happy house. His primary contribution to dinner conversation is a low, authoritative hum, occasionally interrupted by a direct question, "How are your sums?" or "Have you been reading Plutarch?" to which the only correct answers are, "Very well," "Thank you," and "Yes, sir." He is not a man to be trifled with. Of course, the world is changing. There are new ideas everywhere. Railways, suffrage, and trousers with suspiciously wide legs. Father regards these with the same suspicion he reserves for French novels and American biscuits. Every so often he'll lecture the family about progress, which in his view is simply chaos in a top hat. His discipline is measured and mostly delivered through raised eyebrows, a stern cough, or the solemn announcement that standards are slipping. Actual punishment is rare. Father's disappointment, wielded with precision, is far more effective. Occasionally, he will bestow praise, and when he does, it feels like winning a minor medal at the Empire Games. And then, just as suddenly as he appeared, Father returns to his newspaper, slippers, and armchair, leaving behind an aura of tobacco, gravitas, and the sense that, for better or worse, Father still knows best, even if nobody, including Father, is quite sure what that means anymore. Mother is the general of the household, commanding servants, maintaining appearances, and worrying that the neighbor's new drapes will outshine her own. Her stress is matched only by her commitment to pretending she isn't stressed. In the Victorian world, the matriarch isn't just the lady of the house. She's the CEO, head of HR, crisis manager, event planner, and, on especially challenging days, the chief mediator in the ongoing household soap opera. She wakes up before anyone else and is the last to drift off at night, mind still racing through unfinished lists and visions of days that aren't quite centered. From her command post in the morning room, Mother juggles a stack of ledgers, lists, and menus, each one meticulously written in looping, decisive script. She has a mental database of every servant's strengths and weaknesses. Which maid is secretly afraid of mice? Who can fold napkins into swans? And which footman has a penchant for eating leftover pudding? Her organizational skills are legendary. There are field generals with less effective chains of command. Mother's Day is a marathon of micro-decisions and macro-worries. She inspects the parlors and drawing rooms with a gaze sharper than a silver cake knife, noting a spot of dust here, a drooping flower there, a carpet fringe half an inch off. Orders are issued with gentle authority. Polish the banister, decant more lavender water, and for heaven's sake, realign the antimacassars before Aunt Augusta's next visit. No detail is too small. In her empire, dust is the enemy, and its defeat is a matter of pride, social standing, and occasionally maternal sanity. Her public face is serene, lips pressed into the ghost of a smile, eyes perpetually on the lookout for signs of domestic insurrection. A curtain hung crookedly, a servant's apron insufficiently starched, or, the horror, a missing button on a child's collar. Behind closed doors, she permits herself brief, silent sighs and the occasional consoling cup of strong tea. Outwardly, she's the very model of composure. Inwardly, she's running through backup plans, in case the souffle falls or the vicar arrives early. Mother's schedule is relentless. She checks on the kitchen, discusses menus with cook, and reminds everyone that boiled beef is not acceptable 3 days in a row. She writes thank you notes, plans seating charts, and keeps a running tally of which relative is due for a visit and which should be avoided until their scandal dies down. There are shopping, expeditions for linens, and a secret war with the neighbor over whose rose garden blooms first. Children are managed with gentle firmness, herding them from lessons to music practice to the daily don't touch anything in the drawing room lecture. Social obligations pile up like coal in the cellar. The matriarch hosts teas, plans dinners, and navigates the subtle minefields of Victorian etiquette, each one potentially explosive if mishandled. Invitations are accepted or declined with strategic grace, always aware that a single faux pas could trigger months of whispers. She keeps a careful eye on her daughter's hem lengths, her son's neckties, and her husband's likelihood of mentioning the new drapes at the next dinner party. And always, there's the neighbor's drapes, those billowing, suspiciously fashionable drapes, flaunting their superior fabric just across the lane. Mother insists she doesn't care, but there's a glint in her eye every time she mentions the next trip to the drapers. The domestic arms race never really ends. Yet, for all the worry and effort, Mother's reward is the smooth running of her world. The candles are lit, the dinners go off with only minor disasters, and the children know when to smile and when to vanish. Guests leave convinced they have witnessed domestic perfection, unaware of the careful choreography, the panic beneath the surface, and the matriarch's steely resolve. At the end of the day, Mother allows herself a few moments alone. Feet up, hands wrapped around a cup of tea, she surveys her quiet empire. The day's battles, mostly, won, and if she dreams of drapes that put the neighbors to shame, well, she's earned it. In the grand theatre of the Victorian household, the matriarch always takes her final bow, curtain perfectly drawn. It's time for the family's ritual bath, a logistical puzzle involving kettles, privacy negotiations, and water that's lukewarm at best. If you're lucky, you're first in line. If not, may the soap scum be ever in your favor. The arrival of bath night in the Victorian household is met with a complicated blend of anticipation and dread. Once a week, the normal schedule of chores and obligations is upended by the great aquatic spectacle. Baths, in this era, are not relaxing affairs with bubbles and scented candles. They are athletic events, requiring strength, endurance, and, occasionally, emotional detachment. Preparation begins hours in advance. Servants haul countless buckets of water from the kitchen to the upstairs bathroom, or, if you're less fortunate, to a wash tub in the middle of the kitchen floor. Water must be heated kettle by kettle on the range, which means the air is thick with steam, sweat, and the faint aroma of scorched optimism. The very idea of running water piped into a private bathroom is so futuristic it might as well be science fiction. If you are fortunate enough to be first in line, you are the recipient of the only truly hot water of the night. You slip into the tub, feeling momentarily like royalty. The soap is rough, the flannel scratchy, but the experience is at least close to cleansing. You attempt to hurry, knowing every minute you linger is another degree lost for those doomed to follow. Bath night is no time for selfishness. There are siblings to consider, not to mention the stern knock on the door if you dare soak too long. Once you have finished, you rise and wrap yourself in a towel the thickness and softness of an oatcake. Then watch as the next victim, family member, prepares to take their turn. The water, which began the evening clear and inviting, now harbors the secrets of everyone who came before. Soap bubbles, a stray hair, the vague suggestion of what was once clean. If you're in the middle of the lineup, you resign yourself to lukewarm as a blessing. If you're last, well, you're basically marinating in a family stew and must rely on the power of positive thinking to achieve any sense of cleanliness. Privacy is a rare and coveted commodity. Doors are locked, towels are deployed strategically, and the bath schedule is enforced with the rigidity of a military operation. Mothers stand guard, ready to rescue modesty or a small child at a moment's notice. Younger siblings may be bathed together, with much shouting and splashing, while older ones eye the process with all the enthusiasm of condemned prisoners. There's also the matter of supplies. Soap is rationed as if it were gold. Flannels rotate through a suspicious number of hands, and combs are shared with the air of hostages negotiating terms. Scented bath oils or luxurious products are reserved for special occasions, birthdays, visits from important guests, or someone surviving a week without tracking mud through the drawing room. Meanwhile, below stairs, the servants are left to clean up the aquatic aftermath. Bath water is bailed out the window or lugged away in buckets. Towels are boiled. The bathroom is scrubbed with industrial zeal. No one thanks the housemaid who has to deal with the aftermath of 7 different people's ablutions. But she knows the true secrets of the household, and probably who borrowed the good soap last Christmas. By the end of bath night, the entire family feels simultaneously purified and slightly traumatized. You slip into your nightgown, skin tingling from vigorous scrubbing, and try not to think about when this ordeal will come around again. You feel lighter, fresher, and just a bit more grateful for your daily wash basin routine. You may not be sparkling, but you are, by Victorian standards, clean, and as you settle in for sleep, you make a quiet wish for the future. One day, perhaps, someone will invent a way to bathe without boiling an ocean or sharing the water with everyone you know. Until then, may your flannel be fresh, your soap unscented, and your turn always first. Every Victorian home is full of secrets, some scandalous, some mundane, all fiercely protected by thick drapes and even thicker denial. You practice selective hearing and cultivate plausible deniability as an art form. If the drawing room is the stage for family perfection, the rest of the house is the wings, shadowy, bustling, and full of whispered stories that never make it into polite conversation. To the outside world, your home appears spotless, orderly, and respectable. Inside, it's a patchwork of half-truths, silent understandings, and little conspiracies tucked neatly behind tasseled curtains. Some secrets are ancient, older than the house itself. A faded portrait of a long-forgotten aunt with a knowing smile hangs in the hallway. No one ever mentions why she's never discussed at tea, or why her painting is just slightly askew. The attic holds trunks full of letters, clothing, and mysterious objects whose history is strictly off-limits. If you ask about them, your mother simply redirects you to recite the multiplication tables. Other secrets are fresh, little slips of family drama that everyone knows, but no one dares say aloud. Perhaps your older brother failed his Latin exam but claims it was advanced Greek. Maybe there's a recurring disagreement between your parents about whether the neighbor's dog is really the one digging up the petunias. Your father's suspiciously frequent evening walks to the post office are an open joke below stairs. But above, you maintain fiction that his exercise regimen is the stuff of legend. Selective hearing is essential. You learn to tune out arguments about money or servants, hearing only the tap of rain on the window or the clink of teacups. When Aunt Gwendolen visits and begins her usual monologue about the inheritance that should rightfully have been hers, everyone practices the art of looking engaged while thinking about cake. Household staff, for their part, are experts in the management of secrets. The butler sees all, hears all, and says nothing. Unless, of course, it's to the housekeeper behind the pantry door. The maids trade tales of midnight rendezvous and strange noises from the study. The cook knows exactly who skips breakfast and who sneaks extra scones, but would never dream of mentioning it, unless properly bribed with gossip of equal value. Even children have their secrets. Sweets hidden under floorboards, letters never sent, daydreams scribbled in diaries locked with keys that aren't quite as secret as they think. The nursery is a nest of petty intrigue, from who stole the blue ribbon to who told the governess about the frog in the umbrella stand. Betrayals are frequent, alliances fragile, and justice arbitrary, a perfect microcosm of adult life. Sometimes, the family's deepest secrets slip out in the most unexpected ways. A stray remark at luncheon, a half-remembered anecdote shared during afternoon tea, or an old photograph discovered at the back of a drawer. Eyes dart around the table. Someone coughs, changes the subject, or pretends to be absorbed in buttering their bread. And just like that, the curtain falls again. Keeping up appearances is everything. Every member of the family is an actor in the grand performance of respectability. The cost of failure isn't just embarrassment, but social ruin, at least in the eyes of the ever-watchful neighbors. To outsiders, your family is the epitome of order and grace, but behind closed doors, you live with the delightful, exhausting chaos of reality. And so you master the arts of nodding sagely, offering vague agreements, and maintaining an air of innocent ignorance. You keep your secrets, respect the ones you aren't supposed to know, and try your best not to add any scandals to the family ledger. Because in the Victorian world, a spotless reputation matters more than spotless carpets. But if you look closely, you'll always find a little dust hiding just behind the curtains. When sickness strikes, the family doctor arrives with his black bag of questionable cures. Remedies range from cod liver oil to leeches to the ever-reliable rest and prayers, none of which inspire confidence. It always begins with a cough in the hallway or a sniffle at breakfast, instantly sparking concern that this might be the start of something dreadful: consumption, the grip, or, worst of all, the prospect of missing Sunday service. In the Victorian household, illness isn't just a private affair, it's a community drama, and every cough echoes through the house like the tolling of a particularly judgmental bell. The patient is promptly banished to a chilly bedroom, swaddled in scratchy blankets, and offered an extra pillow, both for comfort and to signal to the household that something serious is afoot. There's a special set of linens for sick beds, reserved for just such occasions. The patient is allowed to ring a bell for service, though only at respectable intervals. No one wants to encourage malingering. Enter the doctor, a figure whose presence is both reassuring and ominous. He arrives, hat in hand, with a bag full of mysterious bottles, powders, and instruments best left unexamined. His moustache is solemn, his gaze practiced, and his questions obscure. Does the pain migrate? Or does it linger like last year's weather? He inquires, as if you might have been keeping a diary of all your twinges. Diagnosis is more art than science, equal parts guesswork, intuition, and superstition. The remedies are legendary. Cod liver oil is a favorite, administered with the kind of gusto normally reserved for brandy. Its flavor is unforgettable, a mix of despair and low tide, and it's supposed to cure everything from chest complaints to existential malaise. If you protest, you are reminded that it's good for you in the same tone your mother uses when discussing boiled cabbage. If cod liver oil fails, the next step is treacle. Thick, sticky, and impossibly sweet. It goes down easier than the Rhinus Plus oil, but soon you suspect that the real cure is just keeping your mouth too busy to complain. Sometimes, mustard plasters are slapped onto your chest, a heating pad for the truly unlucky, burning as much as they heal. If you're really suffering, You might be subjected to the ultimate in Victorian medicine, leeches. Applied with great ceremony, they're supposed to draw out the bad humours. In reality, they mostly draw out your patience. For the children, there's always syrup of squills, a sticky, herbal concoction tasting of earth, root, and regret. If that doesn't work, out comes the bottle of paregoric, with just a hint of opium for that peaceful nap, or a spoonful of castor oil, guaranteed to solve problems you didn't even know you had. Rest is prescribed in large, uncompromising doses. You're confined to bed, forbidden from reading novels, lest excitement worsen the fever, and allowed only the dullest moral stories or the family Bible. Visitors arrive to offer solemn encouragement and update you on the neighborhood gossip, which is somehow worse for your nerves than the illness itself. Prayers are said, letters are written, and every member of the family dons an extra layer of anxiety. If you recover, and most people miraculously do, it is declared a victory of constitution and discipline. The doctor departs, leaving behind a bill and a faint trail of medicinal aroma. The patient is reintroduced to daily life with the gentle caution usually reserved for hothouse flowers. For months, you'll be encouraged to take the air, build up your strength, and consume a diet heavy in gruel and thin in excitement. If, however, the illness lingers, you become the household's ongoing project. There are endless remedies to try, from goose grease rubbed on the chest to herbal teas with ingredients so mysterious they might be magical. Every visitor suggests a new treatment: rest, water, faith, and sometimes just thinking positively. And so you lie in bed, bravely swallowing whatever concoction is presented, hoping that rest and time will do what Victorian medicine so often cannot. Eventually, the day will come when you can rise, a survivor of treacle, terror, and tinctures. And until then, you have the dubious comfort of knowing that, at the very least, your suffering is being treated with the full force of 19th century confidence and just a dash of well-intentioned quackery. You try to have a tiny celebration at home, maybe a candle, maybe a prayer, but your candle flickers suspiciously, and within minutes your nosy neighbours assume you're smuggling joy. In the Victorian home, celebration is both an art and a high-wire act. There's a time and a place for everything. And heaven help you if you show even a glimmer of enthusiasm outside those carefully sanctioned moments. Birthdays are quietly acknowledged, not with a chorus of happy birthday, but with a discreet nod and, if you're very lucky, a boiled sweet wrapped in waxed paper. Anniversaries pass with an exchange of cards and perhaps an extra scoop of jam at tea, so long as no one is watching. But say you find yourself wanting to commemorate a minor victory. The baby took its first steps, someone's exam results arrived without disaster, or perhaps it's just Tuesday and the sun shining. You light a small candle, whisper a little prayer, and savor a secret smile. This is your first mistake. In the Victorian world, any deviation from your usual expression of mild, tasteful suffering is immediately suspect. The flame glows brighter than your sense of self-preservation, casting shadows that practically spell out, something good happened here on the parlor wall. Inevitably, a sibling or housemaid passes by, eyes the flickering candle, and is instantly seized by a curiosity that cannot be contained. "What's that for?" they ask, their tone light but their intent forensic. You mutter something about reflection, but it's too late. The rumour mill is off, and running. By afternoon, 3 cousins and the laundress are convinced you're planning a midsummer bacchanal, and the cook is hiding the sherry just in case. Trying to keep things subtle, you swap the candle for a quiet humming session, maybe a gentle tune from last Sunday's hymn. Big mistake. A neighbour walking by the window hears music and instantly peers in. certain that only illicit joy could inspire such reckless melody. Next thing you know, the entire street is abuzz with speculation. Mrs. B suspects you've inherited money. Mr. P thinks there's an engagement in the works. The vicar pauses outside, making a mental note to drop in with a strongly worded tract about moderation and the perils of excessive glee. Attempts to celebrate with food are equally fraught. You dare to serve a slightly fancier cake at tea, and within minutes your mother is eyeing you over her cup, convinced you're covering up for some terrible mistake. Is it your birthday? Did you break something expensive? Have you become fond of someone? Each question is more alarming than the last. No matter how you protest, you find yourself confessing to the crime of being, just for a moment, a bit too happy. Even a heartfelt prayer is risky. Any visible display of gratitude or relief is immediately met with suspicion that you're either ill, plotting to run away, or perhaps concealing a larger and more catastrophic event. In the Victorian mind, peace is fleeting, and the universe is always waiting to punish hubris with a surprise thunderstorm, a stained tablecloth, or an unannounced visit from a meddlesome relative. And should you attempt anything remotely festive, singing a carol in December, dancing a jig after a letter from a distant friend, or hanging a single sprig of holly, you might as well announce your intention to start a revolution. Within moments, the household is abuzz. Father coughs pointedly behind his newspaper. Mother smooths her skirt, clearly torn between pride and panic. Siblings hover in doorways, unsure if they're allowed to join in, or required to report you to the nearest authority figure. In the end, your quiet celebration fizzles, replaced by the familiar Victorian comfort of polite restraint and the soft hum of unspoken disapproval. You blow out your candle, tuck away your prayer, and return to your everyday routines, now more watchful than ever for the telltale signs of joy smuggling. But deep down, you know that even in a world obsessed with order and decorum, a little celebration, however secret, can survive. It lives on in the warmth of a candle, the whisper of a tune, and the unbreakable hope that, despite everything, tomorrow might offer another reason to risk a tiny, forbidden smile. The house is put to bed with military precision, lamps doused, windows latched, and everyone checked for visible signs of moral decay. Your mattress is lumpy, your pajamas are restrictive, and you're already dreading tomorrow's breakfast. Victorian bedtime is less a gentle winding down and more an orchestrated retreat from the day, executed with the same energy one might use to evacuate a small fortress. There is a checklist for everything. Did you wind the clock, extinguish every candle, and tuck the youngest sibling in so securely they might never escape? Each task must be completed in the correct order, or risk the entire household spiraling into chaos, or, worse, embarrassment. As the evening entertainment winds down, the servants begin their last rounds. Downstairs, boots are stacked, hearths are raked, and a final whispered gossip session is squeezed in before lights out. Upstairs, the family divides and conquers. Someone is checking the back door twice. Another is verifying that the cat has not taken up residence in the coal scuttle again, and yet another is tasked with airing out the corridor, lest anyone wake up to a faint whiff of last week's cabbage. Your own bedtime ritual begins with pajamas, voluminous, high-collared, and woven from materials designed to test the endurance of your skin. The concept of breathable fabric has not yet arrived, so you wrap yourself in layers that seem custom-made for someone heading on a polar expedition. Buttons are everywhere, and every one of them requires both dexterity and patience to fasten, lest you arrive at bed half-dressed to scandalize the family parrot. You wash your face at the cold porcelain basin, making sure to splash only a socially acceptable amount of water. Teeth are brushed with powders that taste vaguely of mint and definitely of chalk. If you're lucky, your towel is merely scratchy instead of outright abrasive. You listen to the house settling, the creak of old floorboards, the distant hum of someone reciting prayers, the soft thud of a sibling tripping over an abandoned boot in the hallway. With the house plunged into semi-darkness, you make your way to your room by candlelight. Shadows flicker on the wallpaper, dancing among faded florals and frowning ancestors. Each bedroom is equipped with its own oddities, perhaps a draft that sneaks in through the window frame, a patch of floor that never warms up, or a mysterious stain on the ceiling that nobody mentions. You close the curtains with practiced caution, double-check for lurking spiders, and slide between sheets that have achieved the perfect balance of crisp and mildly damp. The bed itself is an adventure. Lumpy mattress stuffed with horsehair or straw, pillows whose only softness is a distant memory, and a quilt heavy enough to prevent sudden movements, unseemly dreams, or, presumably, personal growth. Once you're settled, you run a mental checklist of the next day's duties. More chores, more lessons, and more strategic negotiations for an extra scone at tea. Lights out is not just a suggestion, it's the law. The matriarch makes her final inspection, casting her gaze across the assembled children to ensure faces are washed, hair is braided, and no one is reading under the covers by candlelight. A soft kiss, a whispered goodnight, and the door clicks shut. For a few minutes, you whisper with your siblings about the day's dramas. Who said what? Who cheated at whist? Who almost knocked over the parlor fern? Laughter is muffled under the covers, fading as sleep creeps in. The house finally exhales. The ticking of the clock is the lullaby, slow and steady. Just before you drift off, you remember tomorrow is another Victorian day. More rules, more rituals, and the faint but persistent hope that someone will invent a softer mattress before you turn 40. Until then, you embrace the weight of the covers, close your eyes, and surrender to the silence, at least until the morning brings its next round of perfectly orchestrated chaos. Lying in bed, you review the day's minor triumphs and major embarrassments, wonder if you've offended the neighbor's cat, and drift off to sleep as the house settles around. You, another day survived, another secret kept. The Victorian bedtime is a time for reckoning, both with the world and with yourself. The house finally lies still, save for the groaning pipes and the persistent ticking of the hallway clock, measuring out the last moments of consciousness. Beneath your mountain of scratchy blankets, you turn from side to side, settling into your personal nest of horsehair and hope, your mind alive with the events of the day. It begins, as always, with a catalogue of tiny victories. You remember the moment you folded your napkin just so, and the approving look from mother that followed. You replay your perfect recitation of Latin verbs, the way you managed not to drop your spoon at luncheon, and how you maneuvered through the family walk without stepping anything untoward or falling out of line. A modest list, perhaps. But in the Victorian world, the smallest triumphs carry the greatest weight. Then come the embarrassments. The failed attempt at a joke during tea, which landed with the grace of a dropped turnip. The time you almost sneezed in the drawing room, or tripped over your own feet on the staircase. You wonder if anyone noticed the jam stain on your sleeve, or if your sister really did see you pocket that extra biscuit when you thought no one was looking. These tiny infractions will haunt you until at least Thursday. Your thoughts stray to your interactions with others. Did you remember to thank the governess? Were you polite to the butler? Did you accidentally insult Aunt Agatha by praising her roses when it was clearly a bad year for blooms? You try to recall the exact tilt of your cousin's eyebrow during charades. Was it amusement or judgment? And what about the neighbor's cat, who seemed distinctly cold this afternoon? You hope it was just the weather and not a reflection of your own moral failings. As you sink deeper into the mattress, you think of secrets, yours, your siblings, and the household's, the crossed note you slipped beneath the nursery door, the laughter you shared after lights out, the guilty thrill of sneaking a peek at the forbidden drawer in father's study. Each small secret is tucked away, hidden behind the heavy curtains of respectability, safe for another day. Your mind drifts from the events of the day to vague anxieties about tomorrow. Will you remember your French verbs? Will the dog behave on the family walk? Will the matriarch's war with the neighbor over drapes finally come to a head? The possibilities are endless and, somehow, equally exhausting. You resolve to try harder, to be better, or at the very least, to avoid being caught. The darkness grows thicker as the fire in the grate dies down to embers. The house creaks and settles, pipes gurgling with mysterious intent. Occasionally, you catch the sound of a distant clock striking the hour, and wonder who else in the house is still awake, perhaps reflecting, perhaps worrying, perhaps whispering into the night. There's comfort in knowing you're not alone in your restlessness. Eventually, the day's memories dissolve into dreams. Your mind floats through scenes of over-decorated parlors, endless chores, and parlor games that never quite make sense. In sleep, the rules soften, the pressure lifts, and you find yourself in a place where even the strictest governess smiles. And as you drift off, you hold on to the hope that tomorrow will bring new victories, fewer embarrassments, and perhaps, if you're very lucky, a slightly softer pillow. Because in the end, Victorian sleep is never just rest. It's an intermission between acts, a brief pause before the curtain rises again on another day of rituals, secrets, and the eternal struggle for a moment's peace. Each room is graced by a coal fire, meant to warm your toes but mostly succeeding in flavoring the air with a fine layer of existential soot. You're never entirely sure if your lungs are freezing or slowly transforming into artisanal briquettes. The faint rattle in everyone's chest is just a normal part of the ambience. The romance of the Victorian home owes a great deal to the coal fire. It flickers bravely in the parlor, stutters along in the bedrooms, and valiantly battles the British damp in the chilly hours before dawn. But behind the gentle glow and the ritualistic stoking lies a more complicated relationship, a blend of heat, smoke, and a slow, creeping suspicion that the family's pallor isn't just from the lack of sunshine. Lighting the coal fire is an event in itself. It begins with the gentle arrangement of kindling, an art passed down from parent to child, followed by a cautious layering of coal. A servant, or the most responsible child, is sent to fetch more lumps from the coal scuttle, leaving a black trail as a reminder of the house's true beating heart. Matches are struck, prayers muttered, and the whole family waits, breath held, to see if the flames will catch, or if it's another night of shivering in solidarity. When the fire finally takes, it brings with it a peculiar kind of warmth. It never quite fills the room, but it does draw everyone closer. Children and pets crowd the hearth, risking scorched toes in exchange for a few moments of comfort. Adults arrange chairs in a careful semicircle, attempting to absorb as much heat as possible without singeing their skirts or igniting the day's correspondence. But with the warmth comes an atmospheric tax. Soot drifts through the air like midnight confetti, dusting everything with a fine patina of historical authenticity. No matter how often the house is cleaned, the evidence remains. Black smudges on the wallpaper, mysterious stains on the antimacassars, and a lingering scent that is equal parts nostalgia and pulmonary hazard. Mother wages an endless war with dusters, polishing cloths, and stern words for any child who dares to poke the grate and unleash a fresh cloud of soot. Breathing in a coal-fired house is an act of faith. The air is always heavy, slightly sweet with the tang of burning carbon, and rarely what you'd call fresh. Guests arrive in clouds of their own smoky fragrance, blending seamlessly with your domestic bouquet. The servants, bravely carrying coal buckets and wielding pokers, develop a cough that is considered both badge of honor and occupational hazard. Opening a window is both solution and provocation. It lets in a draft fierce enough to make your teeth chatter, but it also brings a blessed, fleeting freshness until the neighbor's chimney belches its own offering and the cycle begins anew. Sometimes the fog rolls in, mingling with the coal smoke until the world outside fades away in a soft grey blur, and you're left to wonder whether the sun still exists or if you only imagined it as a child. There's no escape at night either. The fire burns down to embers, but the scent of smoke lingers in your hair, your pajamas, even your dreams. You cough yourself to sleep, consoled by the knowledge that everyone else is doing the same. The morning brings a new round of dusting and discreet throat clearing, as the family rallies for another day of warming themselves, while quietly pickling their lungs. And yet, for all its faults, the coal fire is the soul of the home. Its glow lights up winter's gloom, its crackle marks the passage of the evening, and its stubborn persistence mirrors the family's own. So you wrap yourself in a shawl, settle close to the hearth, and take comfort in the ritual, cough and all, because in Victorian times, a house without a coal fire might be clean, but it would never feel like home. Upstairs, the nursery vibrates with barely suppressed energy and questionable wooden toys. Children are supervised by a rotating cast of adults with varying levels of patience and facial hair. Between alphabet recitations and moral tales, you learn that fun is strictly measured and playtime is one broken teacup away from exile. The nursery is both sanctuary and proving ground, a place where the next generation of perfectly repressed Victorians is raised in an atmosphere of stifled giggles and constant low-level peril. Sunlight filters through faded curtains onto a sea of battered blocks, stuffed animals whose stuffing is mostly memory, and dolls that stare into your soul. There are books everywhere, sturdy volumes with moral fables about disobedient children, illustrated primers on the natural world, and the odd forbidden tale about pirates, kept hidden for rainy days and rebellious moods. No 2 days in the nursery are the same, but every morning starts with a rush of socks, ribbons, and untied shoelaces as children scramble to be dressed and accounted for before the nanny's final head count. The air smells of porridge and soap, with a lingering hint of something sticky that never seems to vanish no matter how often the maid scrubs the floor. It's a rule of life that there's always a bit of treacle on someone, somewhere, and no one dares admit where it came from. The grown-ups in charge come and go, a parade of nannies, governesses, and older siblings drafted into service. Some are cheerful and inventive, inventing games involving bedsheets and chairs, while others believe fun is just another opportunity for character building. Each has their own set of rules, posted like commandments. Don't jump on the beds, don't draw on the walls, don't hide in the laundry hamper, again, and, above all, don't make unnecessary noise. Victorian wallpaper, it seems, is sensitive to shrieks. Toys are distributed according to age, gender, and perceived moral fiber. The favorites are wooden soldiers and spinning tops, rag dolls with lovingly stitched faces, and picture books for those who can be trusted not to chew the corners. Fancier toys, a rocking horse, a china tea set, are reserved for special occasions and children who can be trusted not to drop things. You quickly learn the hierarchy of play. Eldest chooses first, youngest fetches lost marbles, and middle children scheme for black market access to the family's single good yo-yo. Fun, while possible, must be modest and educational. Building blocks are arranged into model churches rather than castles. Doll tea parties are strictly supervised, with all attendees forced to consume imaginary cake in a calm and orderly fashion. Any game that looks like it might get out of hand is immediately repurposed into a lesson about sharing, patience, or the tragic fate of selfish children. Every victory, whether at hopscotch or a spelling bee, comes with a reminder not to boast, and every defeat with a gentle, if slightly pointed, lecture on humility. And then there's the existential dread, the ever-present fear of breaking something precious, saying the wrong thing, or worst of all, being sent downstairs to apologize to the grown-ups. You watch your words, weigh your laughter, and keep one wary eye on the china shelf. Sibling alliances are formed and broken on the hour, shifting like the British weather. One minute you're best friends building a fort out of sofa cushions, the next you're bitter rivals after someone accidentally tugs too hard on a pigtail. When the nursery door finally opens and the call for tea or lessons echoes up the stairs, children spill out in varying states of dishevelment and philosophical crisis. You dust off your pinafore, straighten your collar, and promise yourself that tomorrow you'll risk one extra giggle, or maybe try hiding in the laundry hamper just one more time, because in the Victorian nursery, even under the sternest adult gaze, a tiny streak of rebellion is always alive. Chaos and order, dread and delight, these are the building blocks of childhood, then and now. On Sundays, the entire family dons their finest, which means doubling the layers and tripling the discomfort. You file into church with the gait of a penguin in a neck brace, and spend the service praying for both your soul and for the sermon to end, before you lose all feeling in your lower extremities. Preparation for Sunday begins the night before, as mother orchestrates an elaborate ritual involving brushing, pressing, and laying out the stiffest, most ornate garments the wardrobe can muster. Shoes are buffed to an unnatural shine. Gloves are checked for holes, and hats are adorned with ribbons or feathers large enough to alter your center of gravity. All week you've been cautioned against grass stains and ink blots, but on Sunday, even a slightly crooked cravat could inspire a full family conference, and the kind of sigh usually reserved for small disasters. Come Sunday morning, the house is a hive of nervous activity. Children are shuttled from bedroom to bathroom and back again in a flurry of starch and scolding. Nannies and maids rush about, producing hair ribbons and missing buttons with an efficiency that borders on supernatural. Breakfast is a more somber affair than usual, the mood heavy with anticipation and the kind of dread that only comes from knowing you'll be sitting upright for the next 3 hours. Dressing is a group effort. Corsets are laced with extra enthusiasm, petticoats multiplied, and collars starched to within an inch of their lives. Younger children are bundled into miniature versions of adult finery, tiny waistcoats and bonnets, shoes that pinch and socks that refuse to stay up. Every garment feels heavier and more complicated than it did yesterday. No one is comfortable, but everyone is impressive. The family assembles in the hallway, a tableau of Victorian virtue. Father inspects the troops, issuing last-minute critiques. A crooked button here, a wrinkled cuff there. The matriarch performs a rapid inspection of hair and hands. Siblings eye each other warily, each aware that today's misstep could become next week's cautionary tale. The march to church is a slow procession, every step measured to maintain dignity and the precarious balance of hats, books, and small children. The town is out in force, and the family's passage is noted by every neighbor, rival, and potential suitor. You try to walk gracefully, even as you feel the waistband digging in, and your toes slowly going numb. Church itself is a test of endurance and self-restraint. You settle into a hard wooden pew, surrounded by the collective rustling of petticoats and the occasional muffled cough. The sermon stretches ahead, a winding journey through morality, history, and the vicar's personal vendetta against idleness. You do your best to pay attention, but after the third mention of righteousness, your mind begins to wander to more pressing concerns, like whether you remembered to hide your comic from the governess and if there will be cake at tea. Fidgeting is strictly forbidden. Each time you shift or scratch, you can feel Mother's gaze, a force more powerful than prayer. Father clears his throat, a signal to sit up straighter and look as if the family's reputation depends on your posture, which, in fact, it does. Siblings attempt to pass the time with secret games, counting the vicar's verries, tracing patterns in the stained glass, or daring each other to survive without blinking for the duration of a hymn. After what feels like several lifetimes, the final Amen is pronounced, and the congregation shuffles out. The walk home is quicker, spirits lighter, but the discomfort remains, a dull ache in the feet, a numbness in the legs, and the growing realization that you'll have to do this all over again next week. But as you peel off your layers and finally allow yourself a sigh of relief, there's a sense of accomplishment. You have survived another Sunday, outdressed the neighbors, and, with luck, stayed awake through most of the sermon. It is, in its own way, a Victorian miracle. So, as the coal fires fade, and the last echoes of polite yawning drift through your imaginary Victorian doof home, take a long, contented breath, without worrying about inhaling another lungful of soot. Tonight, you've survived a day behind Victorian family walls, waking to the cold, wrestling with corsets, deciphering unspoken rules, sipping suspiciously weak tea, and maneuvering through parlor games that were equal parts boredom and emotional warfare. You have endured endless etiquette, silent breakfasts, Sunday sermons that last as long as winter, and bedtime routines involving more locks than a modern panic room. Through all the starch, soot, and suppressed emotion, you've witnessed a kind of daily heroism, not the sword-waving, dragon-slaying variety, but the quiet endurance of people who manage to raise families, find small joys, and, mostly, avoid scandal, all while wearing 8 layers of wool underwear. You've tiptoed through drawing rooms, watched as matriarchs managed their mini-empires, and tried desperately not to fall asleep during a live reading of moral literature. And through it all, you've seen that beneath the stiff upper lips and relentless formality, these families laughed, loved, and did their best to create warmth in a world obsessed with propriety. If you're listening from a warm bed with memory foam pillows, central heating, and the gentle glow of a phone screen, send a quiet thank you out to your ancestors. They survived